Three, two, one. Francis LeGasse Jr., you are the president and COO of Assured Assisted Living in Denver, Colorado, and you are the Chief Curiosity Maverick. Yes. I love that title, by the way. Yes. The Mavericks of Senior Living podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the first ever international episode of the Care Home Show.
Yes, it's great to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
It's really, really good. And I mean, just for the benefit of the audience, just to put this all in context. So Francis and I, we connected on LinkedIn fairly recently. We got talking, and it was clear from the outset of our conversation that the UK and America, we've got so much to learn from each other about our respective sectors. So we decided to create this podcast to help people from both sides of the pond to get informed, to get educated, to get inspired around how we can improve the lives of older people and people living with dementia. So not only that, but we realized quite quickly that trying to fit everything into just one podcast it'll probably go on forever. So there's so much for us to share and discuss. So this is going to be the first of a series of episodes. We're going to go on each other's episodes, each other's podcasts. So yeah, it's great to have an opportunity to be able to talk about some of the important subjects going on and impacting both in the UK and in America. So can't begin to explain how excited I am about this series of podcasts together and how grateful I am that we're working together. So thank you, Francis. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more. And I'm looking forward to have some fun with this. I think sometimes, talking about people living with dementia and aging can get a little, depressing and sad. So I'm looking forward to, having some fun.
Absolutely. I think there's a real big push certainly in the UK, and I'm sure there is in the States as well, around trying to improve the general perception, the media perception, and the kind of the general narrative around aging. And I know that's something that you're super passionate about. So I guess kind of getting into it. So in the short time that I've got to know you, it's very, very evident that you are immensely passionate about care for the elderly. So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did it all start for you, and kind of what's that journey looked like for you over the years?
Yeah, a lot of it's been just one of the personal stories. My two grandfathers have both passed, but my paternal grandfather was a 23-year military veteran, and he was 2 tours in Vietnam, a tour in Korea. He lied on his enlistment, and was a tour in World War II. Wow. Then he got dementia that was tied to Agent Orange. They both, pretty certain it was, and you could see the stress on the family, and that was really my eye-opening. Was wow, we're not talking about this. We're kind of prepared, but we're also not. And he was an amazing man. He had a great life, and he was honored throughout his whole life. And, his wife, my grandmother, who's still a feisty 86-year-old, was a nurse. So she kind of understood a little bit better. But a lot of the other families, the siblings especially, there are 7 kids, it was really hard on them. And that was my opening of like, wow, this is stressful. And does it have to be that stressful? And then my other grandfather, my maternal grandfather, he had Parkinson's. He worked as an engineer for 50 years, really intelligent, really stubborn. And you saw when he got that diagnosis of Parkinson's, it deflated him. And it deflated his 2 sons and my mom, who's the only daughter. And she took the brunt of that caregiving. She's the typical sandwich generation, early 60s, has grandkids, has her own children, has a husband. Her mom's not going to be 92, or my grandmother's going to be 92, and she's sandwiched. And you can see that stress. She lost weight. My grandma lost weight. And it was like, why can't we do this different? Why does it have to be so stressful? And that really began to propel me into looking at how do we get more creative into what we're doing. And that's when we founded, our first company, our Sevens Home Care, non-medical home care company. Would they have something similar in the UK where it's one caregiver goes into a client's house and kind of spends more one-on-one time there at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something that's very common, and there's a big push to keep people living in their own home. Certainly doesn't come out without its challenges, I must say, and I'm sure that's probably not difficult not different. Sorry, in the States. We could probably do an episode just on that subject in itself, but yes, absolutely, very, very, very correct.
Yeah, so we started that as kind of a little bit lower barrier to entry. We could have that one-on-one nature. And then families kept going, hey, this is getting expensive. We're 10, 15 hours a day at, let's say $22 an hour, US dollars. It's starting to add up, it's starting to come close to a little over 300 a day. And they're like, well, what other options are available? And that's when we began to embark in that first care home we built for 12 residents with 2 direct care staff, so 1-to-6 ratio. Mm-hmm. And we could offer them a more affordable option, but yet give them that personal touch still. They weren't just one of 20, one of 30, they were one of 12. And that seemed to really help the quality of care, the engagement aspect. And then we began to, bring in some of the newer features, this Montessori idea of how you engage, the Teepa Snow, which is all about this positive approach to care philosophy of meeting them and giving them empowerment for their days. And that's when I began to study more of this idea of this patient-centric. I don't like that. I want it to be purpose-driven. That's what I think. We have to have purpose in our days, no matter if we have dementia or not. Mm-hmm. And they're people first. And man, that's really kind of where we are now, is figuring out how we can start to share that knowledge outside of just our, companies.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess was that part of the purpose for the podcast, to be able to kind of de-silo some of those ideas, share experiences, get other people involved in the discussion, so that that content can be made freely available for everyone.
Yeah, and it was really Catherine Wells who she actually switched careers. She was a huge person in technology, just the general tech sector, and it was her. She created her own app that's called Serenity Engage, that enables, it's HIPAA compliant in the US, that enables families to have one portal to get all information on their loved one or their resident. Okay. And she came to me to pilot it because a lot of the bigger companies were shutting her down. I said, oh, we don't pilot, all these things. And I was like, no, bring it on. Let's try it, right? And so we formed a really quick relationship. And she was the one that kept saying, hey, you got to share what you're trying to do. And I was like, well, I thought about doing a podcast. She's like, let's do it. So we just started it, and we call it Challenging the Way We Age by Mavericks of Senior Living. And the idea is to not just take things as okay, not be accepting of the status quo, and look at all aspects, whether it's technology, whether it's hands-on care, whether it's design, whether it's affordability. I want to really push the envelope on aging, no matter if you're aging at 50 or you're aging at 90. Because things that we do earlier can benefit us later in life.
Yeah, it's all about, and people sometimes get, they sometimes don't necessarily experience great feelings around the word disruption, but it's about positive disruption. As you said, it's about challenging the status quo and kind of asking questions. Why are we doing it this way? How is this going to positively impact the person receiving care in whatever context that may look like? And I think it's important to ask those questions. So I'm delighted about the fact that obviously our paths have ended up crossing. We're obviously of like mind from the perspective that we're very passionate about looking after vulnerable people, specifically older people. And we've obviously got a similar view on sharing content and ideas and things like that, because it's going to help shape the sector at the end of the day. So this first Pan-Atlantic episode, and first of many, I should say, is it's going to be immense, just being able to kind of share your knowledge and to be able to reciprocate. It's I think it's going to have a lot of value for
yes.
Both sides of the bond.
Pardon?
I was going to say it's going to share a lot of value for people both sides of the pond. So I'm really, really excited, and thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's interesting. People often get into the sector because of a personal experience. Mine much the same, in as much as that when I was younger, my sister had a problem with her hip joint. So between me being born and my sister being 5, she basically had to have a shared load of operations and all sorts of stuff. So I ended up spending a lot of time with my grandparents, and then when they were in kind of their I guess in a time where they were looking for care, I kind of got involved in that process and tried to help out where I could. I was quite young, but you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly in that process. That had a big impact on my life, because it's people that I loved at the end of the day, and it was in some ways it was extremely heartening, and in some ways that it was not so much. So yeah, now I'm in a position in my life where I can kind of try and make a positive difference, and it's clearly something that's embedded into the person that you are today. So I got a question about that, actually. So you've obviously talked about this on some level, but explain to me, so what does what you do mean to you personally, so to be involved with care for the elderly?
It comes back to creating hope for those that are aging. It really, what I loved what you said, it's giving back and honoring the generations that came before us. I feel that we have to, how we treat those that are older and those that are more senior to us has a direct impact on how we are as a society. If we're not willing to assist and aid and provide a high level of care for those that have given so much to help where we are today, right? Our parents and our grandparents have done a lot to enable you and I to be having these discussions, right? And I think it's often easy to overlook that, new life, the birth of a child is awesome. You have so much opportunity. And I think it's easy to lose that when you're in your 50s or 60s. What is left? And I believe there's a lot left. It's our job as care providers, as family members, to pull it out of them using new and different techniques to engage them. And I want to empower them that no matter where they are, what station they are in their diagnoses, they deserve that honor and they deserve that ability to contribute to their own life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. So, okay. So, tell me a little bit more about Assured Assisted Living. Obviously, that's your company, but give me an overview on what that looks like and the journey that the business is on from establishing the home care business and kind of where you are today.
Yeah, so the home care was the first idea that we saw, the need for that one-on-one care, but obviously it can get expensive if you're doing 24/7 care. We then moved into the smaller group setting. So with Assured, we moved into where it's about 8 to 9 residents. Again, that same 1 to 4, 1 to 5 direct staff ratio, but it feels like a residential house. So they come in, they can get up when they want, they can go to bed when they want. We can engage them on their level that day. And if they want to sweep the deck, they can sweep the deck. Want to have coffee in their robe, they can go have coffee in their robe. We want it to be as much of their house with a positive environment, that the care is still there, but I want them to be people first, diagnoses second. That's what I think it's a lot. At least in the States, we're all about the diagnoses of cancer, of Parkinson's, of dementia. We lose fact that there are people living with this disease, and that we still need to honor them. And some of the men and women help set the table. They'll help, prepare meals where they can. We want to engage them as people and have a purpose for them every day.
I think that purpose thing is really, really important, and it's something that I guess I get concerned that it's maybe not as that kind of concept isn't as widely appreciated and kind of delivered as it might, but it's important to kind of again share those ideas and just make sure that should just be the benchmark, right? It should be about the purpose, it should be about choice, it should be about meaning, it should be about empowerment in whatever form that looks like, as you say, depending on kind of where that person in their kind of life's journey. But no, that's really interesting. One thing that kind of stands out for me there is the fact that you've got homes of 8 or 9 residents. Now, albeit that there probably are some homes in the UK that have 8 or 9 residents, I'd say that'd be in a vast minority. I'd probably say, at least within a kind of the kind of the day-to-day that I spend when I go to care homes and things, the range is probably from about 30 to 40 beds, anywhere up to kind of 70, 80, 90, maybe even 100.
In one building? Is it one building?
In one building, yeah. So they're spread out.
That's big. That's big.
The ones into kind of triple figures and stuff like that, they tend to be anomalies. But I'd say there's a big push at the moment for homes of around 60 beds. That's almost like an entry standard, if you will. So there's a real challenge around that as well, of course, around making that feel homely, being able to create all of that, the stuff that we talked around earlier, the meaning, the purpose, the empowerment, all that type of thing. I think the main thing that drives that, and I know this is something that we've talked about, is economies of scale. So we'll come on to that, the kind of UK model maybe a little bit later in some of the discussions that we'll have. But yeah, so is that common to have a home with kind of 8 or 9 beds? Is that fairly typical of the US market, or are you doing something that's kind of a little bit special there?
Yes and no. Certain states have a little more of these smaller care homes than others. A lot of the larger ones, like a lot of the ones that are more international, they're going to be 70, 80 minimum, typically 100, 120. We've got a couple of new ones that are going up that are between independent living, which is little to no care, assisted and memory care. They're well over 200.
Oh, wow. Okay. And is that the way that you've described that there, is that so you've almost got like a care pathway within a community?
Yeah.
You might have dom care providing care into the community under the same brand of assisted living, and then within there would be some type of assisted living and then subsequently care home style environment. So wherever you are, and again, that life's journey, you've got support from one particular organization.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. But I think what gets people a little concerned is they stay in some spots too long because they don't like the stigma, especially in the States, of that assisted living or memory care or skilled nursing label, because it has a negative connotation, sadly. I think we have to find a way to drop that language and change it to something more welcoming. I don't know what that is yet, but I think it needs to change. We need to get rid of this dividing out people based on their care levels. Yes, we need to know that from a staffing and a care plan standpoint, but labeling them something different, I think. We're running into that same issue, this economy of scale. So what we're trying to design is 18 units of 18 or 36 that we are divided in groups of 9. So even though they're one building or next to each other, they still feel like small pods. That gives that sense of a smaller community. So we've been working, trying to design something like that, because the economies of scale from an oversight does help. It's easier for our administrators instead of having to float to numerous properties, things like that. So it is a concern that we're trying to address, of how we maintain proper, effective engagement and oversight from our team, but yet still keeping that small, intimate feel for the residents, because they do thrive in that environment.
Yeah. And that's the more modern care facilities in the UK will always aim for maybe not exactly the same model, but let's say a not too dissimilar model, where there are kind of different homely areas that maybe have kind of a slightly different look and feel about them, relevant to the needs, wants, desires of the actual residents themselves. So that's really interesting. Knowing that we're gonna create future episodes and things like that, and knowing that we've we were joking about this before we started, that uninterrupted, I think we should probably talk about this for a few hours. I'll say we'll put a pin on that, and we'll definitely explore that in more detail. I guess before we move on to some of the other things on the agenda, it'd be really, really good to understand a little bit more about the podcast. As I say, I love the fact that we've kind of connected digitally, and that we've managed to create the pan-Atlantic contact together. So as a reminder for the UK audience, the podcast is called Changing the Way That We Age podcast by the Mavericks of Senior Living. So tell me, Francis, a little bit about the podcast and why you decided to launch it in the first place.
So as I said, Catherine Wells, my co-podcaster, she, has personal history. Her mom just recently passed from Alzheimer's. And prior to that, she developed her own app called Serenity app, which was a HIPAA compliant app.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to me to pilot it because she didn't, larger facilities that were more corporate were saying no. And she stumbled upon, my smaller group. And she's like, would you try this? I'm like, yeah, I love tech. If it helps the staff and makes it better for the residents, let's try it. Right.
Give it a go.
And then we kept talking, and she kept hearing all of my ideas and the things. And she's like, you need to have a bigger impact. And I was like, well, why don't we? Because obviously you're living that sandwich generation, and you're understanding. You've been a caregiver for your mom for almost 10 years and not even knowing it until recently. She's like, all right. So we did it. And we came up with the idea of challenging, because we've run in this time and time again, this industry of, I felt like it's kind of stagnated. It's the US especially. If it's had a good financial return and the care's been okay, the model must be okay. And so we're just going to keep doing it. And I keep seeing that over and over again, that in talking to people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they don't want to age how their parents are aging, yet we're not having this discussion about, can we design it differently? Can we train our staff differently? Can we use technology more efficiently to help supplement or augment things that our care staff is doing? How do we really look at it more holistically, not just here's a hotel or a resort style living? That's the new one in the US. I know you guys have it over there. It's called resort style living. So
yeah, not quite call that. It's more kind of, they'd call it like a luxury care facility. Some description, but I mean, it's basically the same thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, and so it's this idea, when we started running in these things, we're losing what matters. So many of these places are so task-based. And what I mean by that is, everyone's got to be up by 7, it's got to shower everybody before 8:30, everybody eats at 9. And I believe that we're all individuals. Yes, we need some similarities, but we have to have control over our days. I mean, think about it. So you go to work for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you come home, you might, go work out, you might go have a drink. You have your days broken up, right, into different segments. Our seniors, we expect them to sit in the same spot all day and that they're going to be okay with it. Like they're not changing their clothes. They're not, that to me is what's mind boggling, is how don't we have a better structure for them during the day? And I guarantee they'd have a better quality of life. We call it work instead of activities, or we call it, social. We change up our current verbiage in the industry to mirror more of what you did for 40, 50, 60 years of your life.
And you go through your life making your own decisions. Yeah, you might have some type of kind of responsibilities and stuff like that. But I think humans, we're geared up to have responsibilities. That's kind of part of our meaning and purpose side of things. But you do stuff that you want to do. You make decisions. You make choices. You contribute. You partake in things. And if you don't do that at any age, that's going to have a massive physical and mental impact on you. It doesn't matter whether you're 9 or 90. It's something that's going to it's going to have a detrimental effect ultimately. So no, I hear what you're saying, and it's the ultimate model challenge, hasn't it? The people that if it is deemed acceptable in a home here or anywhere in the States or anywhere else in the world, that's just not right. It's just not right in any way, shape.
I'd ask any of our listeners, what if I told you had to sit in the same family room for 12 hours a day and all you could do is walk to the dining room and walk back? Right? That doesn't sound good, does it?
It's not life, is it?
No, and I think we need to realize that we can challenge anybody that has a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. Yes, is the challenge going to be different than what you and I can do? For sure. But that doesn't mean we can't challenge them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I get, like I said, I've seen too, and I know we struggle with that. So we struggle with this idea of how do we properly engage somebody that's maybe, changing they're progressing in their diagnoses. And I think we have to do better. And I know we have to do better. And I take full responsibility of that is, I have to keep challenging ourselves to how we improve. And if we get stuck being okay, that I'm not fulfilling the obligation I feel that I have, which is to make sure we're giving the best to our residents, no matter what the stake and no matter how difficult it is. And one thing my father and my grandfathers have taught me is do it the right way, no matter how hard it is.
Yeah. Doing the right thing is always doing the right thing. And often that looks like doing the hard thing. So it's just, there's a truism there if I've ever heard it. So no, thank you for sharing that. That's great. So tell me a little bit about, okay, so how does care for the elderly, how does it all work in America? Give me an overview on what that looks like.
So it's really, I'm going to try to equate it to the UK's. We have our private pay sector, and I'm sure you guys have a private pay component over there. And then we have our Medicaid, which is the low income. And so your assets have to be below a certain level to qualify for Medicaid. There is a big distinction between Medicaid and private pay. You can have private pay that has every bell and whistle that's $10,000, $15,000 a month. And then some states, the reimbursement for Medicaid is as low as $1,500 or $2,000.
Sure.
So, and you can see the difference in the layout of the facility, sometimes the staffing ratios. You can see that can have a negative impact. And that's also why I started the podcast. I believe that our seniors, no matter from the extremely wealthy to those that have not as many assets, we need to provide a high level of base care no matter what your financial station is. Yes, can you add on? Sure. But too often in the States, I feel like your financial status is dictating your quality of care. And we have big facilities and small, some like us where we're 8 residents, and we have some as many as 200-300 residents. So it's a wide range of sizing across the country.
What's interesting about that is that I'm going to say something maybe a little bit controversial in some ways, but I see because we in the UK we will have care homes where there will be exposure to both markets quite often. So you won't have, although there are 100% publicly funded homes and then 100% privately funded homes. Quite often there will be a mixture, and there are different kind of structures around how it can work. So I won't kind of go into that too much, at least in this episode. But largely, you're right. The better funded homes seem to do better from a baseline level of care. What's really been interesting is that sometimes you could have a home that is, let's say, a more humble facility, maybe something that's maybe 20, even maybe 30 years old, but it's really well run. And they might be charging half the amount of a completely privately funded care home, but actually the quality of the care, the culture within the organisation outstrips the luxury care home every day of the week, which is fascinating to see. So there's not always a direct correlation, but yeah, I mean that's kind of I guess an anecdotal view of some of the homes that I've seen. But yeah, it's interesting to hear that. So, and also the fact that there's at a high level there is great parity around the funding structure that you've mentioned there around privately funded and then the publicly funded, which is based on the kind of that it's an asset, total asset kind of wealth, if you like, in the UK, and that there is a discrepancy there. I mean, I'd say in areas of kind of low affluence, if you like, where there's particularly high exposure to the local authority market, that's the publicly funded kind of channel, if you will. Because of the margins that they're operating on, it's very difficult to be able to reinvest back into their business, the business operators. And what that usually looks like is, unfortunately, it looks like cutting corners, because they're not in a position where they've got enough free cash flow to be able to reinvest. So it's definitely a challenge in the UK, and we're, as a sector, very passionate about trying to get the government to understand that the funding that they provide is I mean, it's farcical, being completely honest. So you can stay in a pretty bad hotel
Jesus.
for the amount of money that they fund people with reasonably complex diagnosis of dementia, which it just doesn't even seem right. And there's lots of people kind of pushing for improvements, but at the moment the government doesn't seem to be listening. It's focusing far too much on Brexit and all sorts of exciting things. But don't get me started on that. That could be a whole different podcast in itself. But yeah, okay.
You're right, though. That's the issue that I don't think people realize is politics are having a negative impact stateside as well too. Don't get me wrong. But people don't understand the level of acuity matters. In Colorado especially, we have a flat rate no matter what level of acuity you are. So if you're essentially beginning assisted living and you need no help, you get the same reimbursement as someone that is end stage dementia. And the care needs are completely different. I'll have to pull stats next time, but there are a few states that have a tiered program that as acuity increases, the reimbursement increases.
Sure. Yeah. Which makes sense, right? Because it's going to require more staffing, more resources to make sure that that person hopefully enjoys the best possible life experience.
Correct. Yeah, governments, they don't think we've got to start looking at the bigger picture, which I think these discussions that we're having, I do believe we can create some traction here to have discussions with hopefully people that want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly about what we need to really attack and talk about and not shy away from. That was part of my motivation, was to force these conversations to be more mainstream, not so much in the shadows.
Definitely. I've done a handful of podcasts now where the subject of the both within the care sector in the UK, how that the kind of some of the more negative kind of world views need to be altered, but then also kind of the public perception and things as well. And I think that's down to the choices that the government make, but then also the media outlets and things as well. So tell me a little bit more about the challenges that the US market faces at the moment. What does that look like for you?
So couple one is the staffing. We're definitely struggling here, recruiting, retaining people that want to even be in long-term or aging services. Finances, for a lot of our seniors are becoming a concern. Did they save enough? Are they going to be able to sell some of their personal assets to pay for their care? We in Colorado and a lot of states don't have enough low income or low affluent beds, the Medicaid beds, because the reimbursements aren't sustainable for an operations. You have to find a way to make it a little, again, you don't need to make a lot of money on it, but you need to be able to make sure you're able to upkeep the building, pay your staff appropriately. You have to be able to do some of those low hanging fruit things. Maybe not make whatever 30, 40, 50% margin, but enough to give back to the building and to the people, right? So we're having issues with that. We're having issues with, we have a lot of people that want to talk about the changes, but yet to see really any true changes going on. You have some murmuring going on, but nothing that's been really taken mainstream yet. And I think it's going to change. I'm optimistic in the next 5 years, we're going to see some things coming online that are going to be pretty unique, but I think we need to keep pushing that envelope.
Yeah. I agree. It's interesting. I think my concern is that it will take for some type of, hopefully not disaster, but something more at the negative end of the spectrum for people to kind of stand up and kind of recognize some of the challenges and things from a governmental perspective. But my fear is, I guess, that it will. But yeah, no, agreed. And it's interesting that you mentioned staffing. I think that's definitely one of the biggest challenges in the UK. I'd say
Can I ask a quick question with that? Do you guys do any type of boarding for your direct care staff at all? Do you guys provide housing in or near the care facilities at all?
Really, really interesting point. So as a standard, not specifically. I have plenty of friends who are operators who do own property to house their team members. So it's not, I'd say that it's not uncommon for sure.
Okay. Yeah, because we do that model here for us. We're on the minority side of that aspect of providing housing for our team. And it's been really good for us for recruiting and retention. And it was more of a general question. Sorry to interrupt you. It's more I just wanted, before I forgot, because I think that's something that would be intriguing, going back to this work, live, share mentality for the aging process, to create different types of communities.
Yeah, no, that's it's an interesting point. It'll be an interesting process to go through this, to kind of digest this podcast, and then kind of work out what the almost like the agenda should be for the future podcast. Obviously, we're definitely going to be doing that, so we need to be picking out the right subjects and getting into those in the future as well. But yeah, that's fascinating, and it's great to hear that it's working for you. Most importantly, if that's having a positive impact, then it's got to be worth doing, right? So,
yes.
Give me an overview on. So you talked about kind of staffing ratios and things like that. Obviously, that's of great importance. But tell me about what does that look like in your world, I guess.
So for us, I'm a big believer that right now the human element, how you train your direct care staff, how they interact with your residents, is really important. And the idea that they can provide high level care for 10 or 15 people, which happens at some facilities, mind-boggling, especially if you want to be more geared towards that resident that might need a little extra time getting dressed, a little bit of this, not rushing, having a slower pace, being mindful of the critical elements when you're working with someone with dementia. And so I believe a 1-4, 1-5, 1-6 ratio with the right mix of acuity enables you to do that, because your staff's not getting overworked. You're not burning them out. They're able to sit and chat with the residents and just engage with them. And so they're giving back in the socialization, the stimulation that way as well. And when you run your staff ragged, it's going to have a negative impact, because I'm a believer of happy staff, happy residents, happy staff. It's this circular idea that we need to be a community within a community. And I like to use the term functional family. It's kind of what I throw around.
I like that, functional family. It makes sense, because ultimately these guys are living together largely, aren't they? I mean, it is a home, and that's really important for people not to forget. So that's really interesting. We kind of touched on this as well, about kind of your model of having slightly smaller homes, having kind of less residents than maybe the average. Let's get into that, and let's maybe look at that through the lens of people living with dementia. So from your experience, okay, so how does that play out, relevant again to staffing and things as well? What's the impact for the residents within the services?
So it's less stress on them, because we're not having as many different faces. It's a calmer environment. It's a more personalized environment. Our staff is able to get to know them better, so know some of their nuances. We can get ahead of maybe some sundowning issues or some challenging situations. We can spend more one-on-one time with them, whether that's engaging in an activity, going for a walk, having them help us sweep the deck, cut the vegetables, whatever we can do from their level. We can treat them as people. We can stop being task-based and be that purpose-driven, not resident-centered, because I think that in the US that term's thrown around too much. Resident this, resident that. No, it's the purpose and the empowerment, I believe, are more important, is letting that person have a say in whatever it is. And maybe they only can have a say in 2 things that day: what color shirt they want to wear and when they want to go to sleep. But if that's what we gave them, they had 2 choices that they may have not had the day before. So that's the belief I have. By having the lower staffing ratios, they can age with us. We very rarely have to have a resident move to a different different level of care, because we can provide very high level care because of our staffing ratio. and they're able to age in place essentially with us. And I know that's a peace of mind for a family, not having to go look for a different facility or having to be questioned like, oh, well, if mom does this, are we going to have to get kicked out? And, you know, and the answer is no. More times than not, our staff and our solutions are creative, that we're getting to the root cause that might have caused them to be asked to leave from another facility. I believe that any of the challenging situations, especially for the males, that, you know, males can get labeled in the U.S. as violent or, you know, their behaviors. I believe it's on us as the staff. It's how we approach them. If our approach is wrong, or we scare them, or we don't take account some of the other important elements, they're going to hit me because they're defending their space. They're not angry at me. They're scared. They're frightened. And I think we've got to remember that a lot of the behaviors are because we're scaring them. We're not thinking of them appropriately, and we're not approaching them appropriately.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really interesting thing that there's a real big push in the UK at the moment around lowering the amount of antipsychotic drugs for people living with dementia, to ensure that obviously that they don't have to live with the drugs in their system in the first place. But what that looks like is it's understanding the person and understanding about what their personality type is, what they like to be able to do. And again, it comes back to the purpose of the meaningful existence, the choices, all of that type of stuff. Recognizing that relevant to the delivery of care and ensuring a life experience, as opposed to being kind of the recipient of care as such. Ultimately, that's going to have a massively positive impact on that person's well-being. As you say, like, if you're creating an environment where people don't have choices and they don't have opportunities to do what they want to be able to do, because they're almost going through like a cookie cut process of how care is being administered, then you're not going to enjoy yourself. You're going to be you're not likely to enjoy yourself. It's not likely to be a great experience for you, and it's no surprise that people do get upset. So I couldn't agree more with that. So you mentioned earlier kind of task-based and resident-centric care. In the UK, we talk about person-centered care, but I much the same thing one would imagine. So I'd like to think that largely in the UK we've moved away from task-based care, although I know that it still exists. But I'd like to think that we're making a real shift towards a more resident or person-centered care approach. And as you said, you almost go one step further than that. So it's about being purpose-driven. But tell me about what's that look like from your experience, and how can that be best implemented within your care environments?
Yeah, and obviously it's definitely, we struggle with that, to breaking some old habits and these old philosophies. So don't get me wrong, we're not even close to doing it how I think we should. I think we're trying to make strides in the right direction about this empowerment and purpose-driven. To me, it's taking it a step further. It's this idea that there's parts to the day. There's your morning routine. There's maybe what I call your work routine, whatever that is, something that, because a lot of us will we'll have maybe morning breakfast, whatever that may be, and you'll go work, or you'll go do something out of your house. And then you'll come back and maybe you'll change into sweats or something that's more comfortable, and then have a drink or socialize. It's trying to break the day up into different elements. So we get away from this idea that, we're going to get them dressed at 7, they're going to sit, and we're going to bring an activity to them, they're going to do a puzzle, and they're going to eat lunch. It's like, okay, what can we do better? What can we do different to create more of a flow of a day versus I'm stuck in the house or stuck in a facility type approach? And that's what I want to see change, is being able to break our days up into how we're currently living them before we get diagnosed, which is typically you wake up, you eat something or you don't eat something, you go to work, maybe, do a social event, you work out, you do something, then you come home and relax. It's how can we break a schedule like that up for our residents so that they have more flow and control over their day.
I think that control thing is really important, and it's making it meaningful as well. One of so someone I think I classed them as a friend now, a guest of the podcast a couple of weeks ago, was a lady called Caroline Baker, who's the director of dementia for a big company in the UK called Barchester, and she tells this story about the fact that I think in her first role as a care home manager, if my memory serves me correctly, she joined, and she kind of on the first day that she was working for the home, apparently the nurses were very upset because because one of the residents hadn't been shaven that day, and they were in a bit of a panic about the fact that that Caroline might be upset about this.
Okay.
And Caroline's thought was, well, if this gentleman doesn't want to have a shave today, or maybe even not at all, or at this time or whatever, then that's fine, because that's absolutely his choice. And the nurses were kind of almost baffled about the fact, but hang on a second, our previous manager said that by 9 o'clock everyone needs to be up, everyone needs to be had their meds, everyone needs to have had breakfast, and all the gentlemen need to have had a shave. And that was just the process, whether the residents liked it or not. And obviously that's the wrong end of the spectrum.
Right.
You know, if you could flip that in reverse, what would that story look like? It would look like choice. It would look like purpose. It would look like that gentleman doing basically as he saw fit, because he's the person living that life. One of the anecdotes that Caroline shared that I really appreciated, and it's something that I've thought about a lot since the episode, is the fact that we need to spend an awful lot more time learning about dementia from the experts, and the experts are the people living with dementia. You can go and get a PhD, you can go and study it for decades and decades and decades, but ultimately the people that we need to be learning from are people whose lives are impacted by living with dementia or Alzheimer's. So it's
wow, that's a strong statement. That's a strong statement, because I think I've learned more watching and interacting with our residents. And one of the blessings I've had is I've worked every single shift that we've ever had for any of our direct care staff. So I know what it's like to prepare the food, know what it's like to perform showers, dressing, grooming, all of that stuff. And it matters to do it when they want to do it. And but you can learn so much by the resident themselves. I'm going to stick with that statement's going to stick with me for a while, because I think that we try to get almost too academic at times with this disease. That's powerful. I mean, that is really powerful.
It's one that stuck with me ever since Caroline presented that to me. It's just something that pops into my head, and I sit and kind of almost meditate on it and just contemplate it and think about it. And it's something really important. And my hope is, obviously we've got a good audience for the Care Home Show. I really, really hope that it's impacted as many people, lots of other people, including me, because it is important. That is. We've got to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're looking after. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that's the kind of the lesson within all that, and that's very much a cultural thing for sure, and it's a cultural shift that it sounds like both the UK and America could do with kind of turning the dial up on a little bit, and anyone that watches the Care Home Show will know that. So company culture, specifically that in care home businesses, is something that I'm immensely passionate about, and it's something that I find endlessly fascinating. So really interested to hear from you. So how important do you think that culture is for within a care business?
I think it's the most important. How we treat and respect our direct care staff, our managers, our vendors, is indicative of how we provide care for our residents. Because in the end, we are providing care for someone's best friend. We have been bestowed the greatest honor, someone entrusting us to take care of their best friend. I firmly believe if we ever lose sight of that, no matter how much money we make, how big of an impact we have, then we are still doing a disservice. And thus, I think we have to show respect We have to get more creative as to how we provide additional benefits to the team, not just financial gain. Whether that's housing, tuition allowances. We have to come up with some other things besides just raising their pay, because it's just not sustainable. We can't keep raising. Everything can't keep going up per se. So we have to find alternative means to encourage them and to promote from within, and to instill a sense of purpose and value. And my dad taught me at a young age is, you treat an entry-level person with the same respect as you treat someone at the executive level. You never treat anybody differently because of what their job is. Every job has a role. Every job is equally as important. And I think too often we have a stigma of not fully giving credit to our direct care team, which are the most important people as far as I'm concerned. And so whatever we can do to better their lives and provide a better value to them, I want to try to do it.
Yeah, no, it's super important. I'm glad that you agree. I think that's probably part of the reason why we get on so well, albeit again, we haven't known each other for too long, but right. I think from kind of a worldview perspective, I think we're really, really aligned from that perspective. So that's fantastic to hear. I've got to apologise for typically, as we are in England, the weather's bad, so you might hear a little bit of rain pattering on the window at the moment. We're probably could have thunderbolts and all sorts this evening, having looked at the weather report. So apologies about a little bit.
You guys throw on sound effects for the podcast, or we don't have to add those in, right?
Yeah, that's right. So company culture, absolutely essential. Then by the sounds of things, which again I completely agree with. One of the biggest things within culture, of course, is leadership, because those are the people that are ultimately going to create culture. You've obviously been operating your business for a while now, and you've doubtless learned an awful lot about leadership in the time that you've been running the organization. So tell me, what have been your biggest leadership lessons?
I've made some mistakes, that's for certain.
Haven't we all?
It's respect is earned. You can't assume it's given. That's probably, both from what I've learned from my father, especially, and just from my belief, is that I have to earn your respect every day, whether that's a family or whether that's a team member. But at the same time, I have to show them the respect that they have earned and deserve as well.
Yeah,
that's probably a great place, I think, to start. And then we've got to lead from the front and not ask a team member to do something we want ourselves to do, which is why when we first got started, I worked all different levels of the shifts and stuff. I've worked overnights, I've worked day shifts, morning shift, afternoon. I've, done home care shifts. I want to be able to understand their struggles, their challenges, and build systems that help them with those challenges. And I want to listen to them. I want to listen to the boots on the ground and trust what they're saying, so we can do things that help them, thus in turn help the residents. And I don't ever want to assume that I know everything because I started the company or I'm the owner, whatever you want to call it. I want to do things that are best based on what the team is telling me. And then it's my job to figure out how to make that work both financially and implementation wise. Because in the end, if I don't listen to what they're telling us, then I'm not doing a service to our residents, because they're going to know our residents best and know what we need to do to make sure we're meeting their needs.
Yeah.
So
no.
It's setting your ego aside and trusting your team members is probably the biggest thing that I've learned, is allowing your team members to make mistakes and you be there to help support them as you work through the challenges that might have occurred.
You've just touched upon two really interesting points there. So putting one's ego aside, we've all got one, but it's how you can kind of look in on yourself, I guess, and kind of reflect on kind of the decisions that you make and the kind of the habits and behaviors and things that you've got. And then also trust, of course, being able to trust people, giving people an opportunity to be able to make mistakes and creating an environment where that's okay. I think that's one of the big things in healthcare as a whole. I think that the perception around mistakes it's not constructive, right? I think that it's difficult to be able to make mistakes when you've got when you're talking about people's lives, of course, but it's about positive risk taking. It's not about being ridiculous about this. It's giving people opportunities just as much as anything else. So no, I think that's really, really helpful. Okay, thank you. And so if you were to give one piece of advice to somebody looking to make a positive impact on older people or people living with dementia, what would that be?
It's a fantastic question. More fun. I think we often look at this diagnosis as especially in the States, oh, that's it. Okay. You got to go sit somewhere and you can't do anything. I think it's using the team and building a team around you and your family that can support you in doing some of those things that you want to do before the disease progresses too much. I would really say that there's a lot of value that we can give to, especially someone early on in the diagnosis, that they can still travel, they can still do other things. We just have to be a little more creative with it, but not shy away from, just because a person's living with dementia doesn't mean their life has to stop. It maybe needs to get a little more creative. So I would say, don't give up hope. Face your challenges head on. And anytime you face a challenge head on, you can create new hope, hope for something different. And that's what I truly believe is, creating hope for those that live with dementia. We can do that.
It's taking a positive view on it, isn't it? Yeah, the implication, I guess, of living with dementia is that there are going to be implications. Of course, there are, but it's looking for those opportunities and being positive about those opportunities and taking those opportunities as they creating opportunities, as they come. So, no, I think that's a great piece of advice. So thank you for that. And how about you? So personally, what's been the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
We might have touched on this, and I can't remember if we talked about it before or during the show here. It's do it right, no matter how hard it is. So basically, do it right the first time, no matter the difficulty. Don't try to cut the corners. Take it, my dad has always said, it's better to do it right the first time. And it's stuck. I mean, there's been some times when it's been hard to do it the right way, but in the end, it's come out better because we just took it on the chin and we did it the right way.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think that's a tremendous piece of advice. Your father was obviously a very wise man, and it seems to be serving you really, really well, Francis. So
we won't tell him that too hard. We won't tell that too many times. Though. Can't have a big head. So.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted that we've recorded this episode together. It's been a real pleasure to have you as I say, as the first pan-Atlantic podcast. This is it. Exciting stuff, and I'm really looking forward to coming on to your show.
Yes.
And continuing this series. So, Francis, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and I'm already looking forward to the future episodes.
I'm as well, and I can't thank you enough, Simon. I've seen a lot of your the care home shows and stuff you're doing, and I applaud you because it's the direction we need to start taking this industry. It is. And like I said, I support everything and anything that you can do, on your side of the pond. And I hopefully look forward to one day we have some collaboration where we can do some really good things, both in the UK and in the States here. So I'm excited about, the opportunities for both of us. So thank you again for being the first international guest on your show. So
I tell you what, it's a great feeling, and I feel like we've got a really similar worldview, and I think this is the beginning of a real fantastic opportunity for us to be able to collaborate and share ideas for both sides of the pond. So thank you so much, and looking forward to our future episodes. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Sounds great.
Cheers then, Francis.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.